Somewhere Better by I_am_Ellie on AO3. Episode 47, Chapter 6, Leave It at That. There had been a scream. A shriek, really. The child yelling Shota's name. And it all happened so quickly, Shouta still had trouble working out exactly what happened and why. But Yuna was in her chair, shaking, and hazed eyes rocking back and forth, muttering about someone named Toya. And Izuku was crying and he looked scared, and his own queries and worries fell aside, and the hero training he underwent at UA took its place. Hizashi and Nemuri stood on either side of the woman, frowning. Hizashi had looked ready to grab her, and Nemuri had torn off the sleeve of her hero uniform, just in case she'd have to use her quirk. But Yuna wasn't doing anything, instead rocking back and forth in her chair, staring at the desk, just like she'd stared at doing when they walked into the room, eyes hazed and glazed, like she wasn't entirely sure of where she was, and Izuku was still trembling in his seat, breath hitched on their way out, like he had been trying not to cry or calm himself down or... Shota's hands were buzzing, leftover fear and adrenaline and confusion, and the beginning of anger making themselves known, and he clenched and unclenched his hands into fists, standing particularly in front of the child, behind him, and the woman who was sitting at the desk. He felt a tug on his tracksuit, and he turned around to see the child staring at him with tear-filled eyes. His bottom lip was quivering, and his shoulders were shaking, like his body was trying to choose between being upset or being scared, and had decided on a medium. There was something in his eyes, something raw and scared, and so sad in his eyes, something that reminded Shouta of much of the people he had saved on his patrols, that he grabbed the child, picking him up and rubbing his back in slow circles as Izuku burrowed his face into Shota's capture weapon and cried. And it didn't feel awkward that time. It took a total of 20 minutes for Izuku to calm down, and for Yuna to come back to herself. Yuna had been wearing makeup before, eyeshadow and eyeliner, but it was smudged and messy now, smeared over her eyes. She was shaky and pale and looked close to crying herself, rambling out apologies as Hizashi and Nemuri reassured her, still keeping close to her side to apprehend her, should the need arise. Izuku was sitting across his lap, hands clenched tight in Shota's capture weapon, and half his face buried in it as well, and he refused to move, not even when Hizashi offered to hold him instead. And the child was getting heavy, leaning his entire weight against Shota's leg and torso, and it was making his knee ache and making Shouta feel a bit uncomfortable. But he wouldn't say anything. If the child needed help, if the child needed a hug, or anything of the like, Shouta would do it. He could do it. Yuna stopped apologizing to them. And then she was apologizing to Izuku, and it was so unlike her usual attitude, at least to Shouta, that it made his head spin. Careful confidence, intimidation, and uncomfortable sense that she knew something that you didn't, replaced with a tired, wrung-out, babbling mess. It was unnerving. What happened? Shouta asked, in the no-nonsense voice he usually reserved for criminals. In that moment, he didn't feel like Shouta. He felt like Eraserhead, interrogating an assailant. He felt like if he needed Shouta in the moment, he wouldn't have been able to stop himself from getting angry, because Izuku was still crying into his capture weapon, even if he was trying to be quieter now, and he had to keep a level head. I wasn't expecting it. I'm so sorry, Yuna said, a few rounds of shakiness overtaking her. Breathe. It's all she said slowly. Catch your breath. Calm down. Tell us what happened. Please. My quirk is called memory, Yuna began. It means that, depending on how repressed the memory is, and whether or not the host can even remember it, and how recently they thought about this memory, I can extract it and see it. Usually it's a very useful quirk for my profession, without any horrible side effects. Before I came here, to this office, I used to work with patients with post-traumatic stress disorder. Veterans, mostly. A few heroes. And it's still a useful quirk, today, with a few of the kids I work with. She swallowed thickly. God, It would break your heart what... She cleared her throat. Depending on how deep the memory is, it's fairly easy to do. If the memory is recent or the host thinks about it often, or positively, it can be about as easy as watching a movie on TV, but for memories that hold a lot of weight, that the host tries not to think about, that's when it gets a little tricky. This happened fairly often at my old place of work, but usually the patients knew what to expect. But eventually, it interfered with my work so much, I had to choose a lighter profession. So now I work with kids. It still happened sometimes, but... But what is it? Nemuri pressed. It's like when you're daydreaming and you get lost in your head. Yuna began. The more weight the memory holds, the more it affects the host's life. Shouta wished she stopped calling Izuku a host. The worse the memory is, then the further I have to dig to get it. And when I do that, sometimes it's difficult to tell the difference between memory and reality, and they get a little scrambled. And the host usually feels some pain depending on how far I have to dig to get the memory. I knew Izuku was thinking about it. You know, the reason he started seeing me in the first place. So I thought it'd be easy to get it, but it wasn't. She sighed. I thought it would have been simple, like when I have my patients draw, so I can analyze the drawing and get flashes of their thoughts as they think about their own family life. Just little images, not a complete picture, but just enough to get a basic summary, and I messed up. I dig too deep to get the memory. I'm so sorry I scared you, Izuku. I never wanted to do that. Izuku sniffled, wiping his eyes and nose on Shota's capture weapon. Shouta made note to wash it in the sink as soon as he got home, so it would be clean and dry for patrol, and turned to look at Yuna. He frowned. His shaking had calmed down, at the least, but Izuku's mood could change on a dime. Anything could trigger another bout of crying. Mean, he whispered, and Shouta felt like he was the only one who had heard the child. Yuna frowned. What was that, Izuku? Yuna asked. Izuku's jaw set with determination. Mean! Izuku accused. You're mean! You were mean! You looked in my brain, and I didn't say you could do that, and you scared me, and you scared my unkies, and you knew it could happen, and you didn't ask me, and you're mean. The child's face had taken on a red tinge, and Shouta thought Izuku might start having a tantrum if he didn't get him to calm down. Mean! You're mean! Izuku, I'm so sorry. He's just upset. He doesn't mean it. It's all she said placatingly, gesturing at Shouta to get Izuku out of the room. Shouta nodded, adjusting his hold on the child in his lap, and bracing him on his hip, taking him out of the door. Nemuri followed along, close behind them. Calm down, please, Shouta requested. No! No! Izuku yelled, and the sound of it grated on Shota's ears, fraying his nerves. No! She's mean! She's... I know, Shouta said, and he tried not to wince as the child babbled incoherently with doubts of screaming and crying in between. He walked the child up and down the hallway, Nemuri standing to the side and looking awkward, like she wasn't quite sure what to do. I know, shh. Izuku let out an angry shriek, pounding his fist against Shota's shoulder, and it didn't hurt because Izuku was 5, but it still made something in Shota's chest ache. Breathe, slow and deep. Come on, you need to calm down. I know you're angry. I'm angry too, but you have to calm down. He was angry. Shouta was furious, because she had used her quirk on a child and had scared him and had made him cry even though she knew the risk, without Shota's permission, and it was taking everything in him not to yell and shake like Izuku. But he was still Eraserhead. Eraserhead was still there. Eraserhead was still helping him calm down as Izuku screamed into his capture weapon and beat his fist against his shoulders and sobbed. And Eraserhead wasn't going to leave. Not until everything had calmed down. Izuku cried himself out. He sat down on the floor of the hallway, Izuku sitting next to him, and leaning against his side heavily. "Explain why you're angry," Shouta requested, because it always helped him when he talked to Hizashi about what was making him upset or scared or angry.
She's mean, and she broke into my mind, and I didn't tell her she could. I didn't. And no one was supposed to find out about Tomura, and I couldn't convince him, and I hate him, and it was all my fault."
Shouta had understood about half of that, and that was being generous. But he only nodded as the child next to him calmed himself back down, breathing deep in, deep out. He wiped the tears from his eyes. Another deep breath. "Better?" Shouta asked. Izuku nodded slowly. "No one knows anything except Yuna, and you can ask her not to tell your uncle and I. If you want." Even if he wanted to know, just so he knew what it was that was bothering this kid, and what he could do to fix it. "You can go in there right now, and then we can go home. Yes?" Izuku nodded again. "All right." Izuku disappeared into the office. Hizashi walked out a moment later. A few minutes passed before Izuku walked out, tear tracks still on his face, along with a look of utter determination. Shouta drove Nemuri to the UA building so she could go home in her own car. She gave Izuku a kiss on the forehead, leaving with a "hope you feel better, tiger." They drove home. Shouta, Hizashi, and Izuku ate leftovers for dinner. Izuku nearly falling asleep at the table. Almost falling asleep at the table in the middle of eating his ice cream. Hizashi volunteered to tuck the child into bed, helping him into his pajamas, and reading to him until he fell asleep, which didn't take long. Takara and Akio jumped into the child's bed and curled up into his sides, both purring softly, and thankfully not barking. Even though they would usually move them, Shouta and Hizashi left them there, because the child had had a bad day, and they weren't about to move the cats, too. The day ended. The day where too much had happened finally ended, with both Hizashi and Shouta laying side by side in bed, staring up at the ceiling. Patrol canceled for the night, because despite their need for extra money, they were just too tired to try. "Should we get him a new therapist?" Hizashi asked quietly, and Shouta honestly didn't know how to answer that. "I believe that should be up to Izuku." And they left it at that. Izuku woke up the next day feeling groggy, disoriented, and with the very distinct feeling that he did not want to get out of bed. The cats were on either side, Akio with her head resting against his arm, and Izuku slowly ran a hand through the kitten's silky black fur. Takara woke up a moment later, the calico looking at Izuku disdainfully for daring to pet her relenting roommate, and not her, and Izuku scratched the much older cat behind the ear to please her. It was gray, early morning light streaming in through the window. His room was its usual mess. Toys strewn across the floor, carpet covered in pencil shavings, and the occasional Lego. And Izuku knew that he would have to clean it up sooner or later, or else suffer the wrath of Ankisho and Ankisashi's hatred of messes. He felt like he was missing something. There was a reason his chest felt heavy and his eyes were puffy, and he felt like he was going to die or pass out or both, and the idea of getting out of bed and facing the day filled him with dread. He got out of bed, and that's when it hit him. Denki's parents, the accused cheating, getting in trouble with his unkies, the doctor's appointment. That day had too much in it. Toya. There was something inside, something groggy, like something that didn't belong there, that had stuck on and held tight after he woke up, and was pleading him to go back to sleep, to deal with this on another day. He smelled eggs burning in the kitchen. Ankisho was probably trying to help Ankisashi cook, and Ankisashi probably hadn't been able to think of a nice way to refuse. He got up. He got dressed without Ankisho's help, pulled on his button-up and his slacks and his socks, and he tried his best to button up his shirt, and mismatched it along the way, and quickly padded his way into the bathroom on socked feet so he could comb his hair. Well, he tried. He abandoned it immediately after he started. He walked into the kitchen. Ankisho immediately grabbed him and pulled him into the bathroom so he could brush his hair and fix his button up. And when he came back, eggs were on the table, as was a bento for his lunch. He ate the eggs, and his uncles ate theirs, and no one said anything. Ankisho drove him to school and let him hug an extra long before he walked into the building. The nice lady at the office looked at him like she didn't quite trust him before relaxing a bit and guiding him to an uncoded spouse room labeled ISS. There was a gym teacher there, the one that had the observation quirk, eyes covering his entire body. Denki was in the room too, but he wasn't allowed to sit next to Denki. He had to sit by himself and not talk and do anything but the work that was assigned to him, a heavy math packet, and thinking about the equations on the paper. And time marched on, and that day was better than yesterday. Even if he hadn't seen any of his friends, it was a good day. A good day. Even if he couldn't stop thinking about what happened the day before, it was a good day. I don't have a lot of good days anymore, Izuku thought brightly as he waited for his uncle to pick him up from school. He thought the same thing the next day, when Ochako had finally told him what was wrong, that her grandmother was dying, and that the medical bills were racking up, and her grandma might not be able to keep her, and she wasn't sure what was going to happen to her after that, and he hugged her while she cried. Alright, so I want to talk about that ending, specifically Izuku's repetitive motions of saying it's a good day. It was a good day. It is not a good day. It is what I would call a numb day. It's a day after a bad day. I don't know what's worse, bad days or the days after. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know what's worse. The bad day, the bad event, the horrible thing that made your whole day be ruined, or the day that comes after, the numbing feeling of waking up and remembering the day before and not wanting to get up, feeling so utterly tired and so utterly lost that literally nothing you do helps you be happy, and that the fact that you're sitting there and you're just like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm filling up my mind, but I do not feel okay. But it's a good day because yesterday was a bad day, so today is a good day. It's a good day, but it's not a good day. It's a numb day. I always call those days numb days. Sometimes I get numb days without having a bad day. Those are absolutely horrible because I am numb. I feel horrible in the sense of I don't feel anything. I am numb. Nothing is making me happy, but I'm not sad. I'm just existing, and it's an utter peril of just nothingness. And I can't do anything about it. There is no cause to it, and it is horrid. It is horrid. Often I can tell when those days are coming up, when stuff that normally brings me happiness as I'm watching them, no longer bring me happiness. You know, obviously, and stuff like that. Like, for example, sitting here and reading these fanfictions to you guys brings me utter happiness. But whenever I feel as though I'm sitting here and it's a chore, I'm just sitting here and I'm just doing them, I'm like, oh, fuck. My numb days are coming. My days of absolute numbness. I mean, like, technically speaking, every day for me is kind of a numb day because I'm always not necessarily happy, but I'm not sad. It's just I exist, right? But it is bearable. It is bearable. I have bearable numb days and I have unbearable numb days. Days where it's literally so much where it's just like nothing is making me happy. Nothing is making me upset, right? Those days, or not nothing is making me upset, like very little things are making me happy, right? And it's fleeting happiness. As I'm sitting here and I'm watching something that I absolutely love, happy, 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 and then it stops. And then I'm searching for it more and then it's not coming. A lot of the times what I end up doing is I start seeking sadness, or start seeking anger. I start seeking any emotion, honest to God. Anything that would make me feel anything because I feel horrid. And in the sense of I feel horrible, but not to the point where I feel sad. It's I feel horrible. But it's not sad, it's not bad, it's neutral horrible, if that makes any fucking sense. It is absolutely atrocious to go through. But I want to talk about what Izuku's going through. Numb day, right? Izuku clearly has some mental issues. Surprise, surprise. Alright, surprise, surprise. Izuku went through a very emotional day, right? A very emotional day, a very heavy day, right? That heavy day is going to be followed by numb days, by recovery days, by tired days. Because you feel the effect of a very heavy day for days. right? Yes, that day was a horrible day, and the rest of the time, it's okay. It's not horrid, it's not horrible, but it's just, I'm recovering, and it's not always the greatest thing. Recovery is not always so happy and upbeat. Recovery sometimes is painful and fucking repetitive and numb. I know specifically, for me, March 14th was worse than March 13th. March 13th of 2020 was a horrible day for me. But I think March 11th was a horrible day for me. But I think March 12th, 13, and 14 were the most horrid afterwards. I wasn't sad, I wasn't upset. The thing already passed. That thing, which was supposed to be a horrid, very traumatic event, passed. Yet I feel the effects afterwards. You know, it's kind of that situation. Obviously, Izuku's feeling numb, right? And he even thinks, I don't have a lot of good days anymore, right? Meaning, Izuku could have some sort of PTSD, in the sense of not PTSD, but he could have maybe situational depression, could have just developed depression, because you can develop depression. He definitely has anxiety. I mean, canonical Izuku very much probably has an anxiety disorder, but he could have developed depression, stuff like that, right? Because of what happened, because of so many circumstances pulling him to this. And it could just be that he has a situational depression, in the sense of it is very much he is depressed at the moment because of everything that's happening around him. Therefore, he is depressed, right? Like, for example, someone who is in an abusive relationship can have situational depression. In that moment, in the situation that they're at, they have depression. Their brain is not giving them enough serotonin to be happy, because of the circumstances that they are under. The second they leave that circumstances and they start to heal, the depression could go away. Or it could just stay and they gain depression thanks to a situation, right? It depends. But for the most part, I really hope that Izuku does not do that. But, could very well be that. Collections. I need to know how to get collections. Anyways, you know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. But yeah. It is emotionally draining, the days after bad days. I don't know about you guys. For me, it is. And it hurts my soul to see Izuku like this. And I want to talk about the therapist. The therapist knew that there could be very big drawbacks. And the therapist used to work with PTSD people, which is, again, let me just emphasize. People with PTSD sometimes do not remember the events that happened. And it's for a good thing. If your brain is repressing the memory so much, do not pull it up. Do not pull it up. If it takes so much work to pull up a memory, right? To remember a memory vividly, do not pull it up. Do not. Right? And in the circumstances of this therapist and her quirk, if something is so hard, like if a memory is so hard to retract, it is for a reason. In psychology, there is this thing that I learned. The brain represses memories for a reason. If your brain cannot handle, if you cannot handle the memory that happened, you will forget it. And if you could handle it, you will remember it to the most vivid point that you can. It's why traumatic events sometimes are so vivid, right? Whether it be the emotion you felt, whether it be the actual thing, right? It depends. For me, there's some traumatic events, specifically March 11th. I do not remember exactly what happened, right? I remember parts of it. It's fuzzy, but it's way more vivid than any of my other memories from 2020, right? But I do remember something so vividly. The emotion, the fear, the dread. It is embedded in my soul, in my brain. Why? Because the memory does that. Your mind makes you remember a traumatic event, right? If you can handle it, or makes you remember parts of the traumatic event, so that you can then, in the future, avoid it. That's how PTSD forms. It is your brain finding a coping mechanism. This is a coping way. This is, hey, This is so I'm reminding you constantly. Oh no, that is too similar to the thing. Reminder, reminder, reminder. Danger, danger, danger. It is basically your mind fucking you over. It is so that you don't have to experience that again. But it backfires because your brain is quite literally making you relive that again. In memory. Not IRL, but in memory. Basically, PTSD is a form that the brain tries to protect itself from experiencing a traumatic event again, but in the way, it's also fucking you over because it is making you relive it. It's not making you, obviously, you know, it's to prevent you from that to happening, but it's making you relive it, and it's horrid. It's horrible, right? But obviously, if a mind represses a memory, it is because you are not to remember it, right? Or if a mind, as I sense me, right? My memory of what happened March 11th, it is not vivid. But if that therapist was to use her quirk on me to pull up that memory, I would have probably a really horrible traumatic experience that day. Why? Because there's a reason why I don't remember it vividly. Why I only remember bits and parts, and why the only thing I remember is the absolute fear, the dread, the emotion, because it's the only thing I could handle. I don't think, even now, I don't think I could handle reliving that in my memory. I don't think I would be able to handle that, right? And clearly my mind knows this. Our minds know when we can handle a memory or not. If you remember something, that is because you are able to handle it, or to a capacity, right? Your mind makes you remember so that you don't experience it again. And if you completely forget a traumatic event, it is because your mind, it's protecting you. It is protecting you from remembering that, because I need to stop staring at myself in my reflection of the mirror because I'm staring at my eyes, and eyes are scary. But it is because your mind is protecting you. And if you can remember it, it is because your mind knows you can remember, therefore it is trying to prevent it from happening again. For that therapist definitely knows that the mind represses memories for a reason. For that therapist to bring up a memory of Izuku's that was very, very much deeply embedded, that is, what the fuck are you thinking? What the fuck were you doing? Like, actually, what the absolute living fuck? That is not something you should be doing. It really isn't. Okay, enough yapping. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.